Hey guys, Katie here, and I am finally getting around to posting my contribution to July's collab for the CDT featuring Christmas in July. I am running out of July, but we have been running ragged around not only my full-time job, but our personal lives. So I hadn't had a chance to do this, but I did pull out this photo. Now it is a large photo, which a lot of people are kind of intimidated by, but I'm going to kind of walk you through some tips. This is last Christmas, of course, my mom, me, my brother, and my sister. And I only have a few photos from this. So even though I'm going to make a one-page layout on this video, I will have a second layout that just has like 4 or 5 photos. We got together with our extended family, my mom's brother and sister and their families and my cousins. And we had a full house. I think it was 35. The only people we were missing were Keeland, our oldest son, and his wife, Justine. So big house. I mean, big get together. So I've also pulled out a couple of collections. We've got Reindeer Days, specifically this. And then maybe this. You know, my mom is wearing red right there. So I think if I bring in little bitty pieces of red, it'll kind of complement the photo. I like this one, even though there are no deer around. You can see the rustic look of just my cousin's backyard here. So I think that that's going to play nicely. And if all else fails, I have the back side to this. And then I've also pulled out just some scraps from the A Little Festive. And I'm thinking this one and maybe this one. And then, of course, it's got the red on the back as well. And then I do have some from this A Little Bit Festive. It came with a sheet of cutouts. So I've got all of those and these little things. And it's going to make it really easy to get this layout put together. Now, one thing I have pulled, I love to mix things. One thing I have pulled is the new Fright Night. So this, as you can see, is Halloween, but I'm loving this image. Not only the image itself, the shape, but I'm loving this, and I'm thinking if I ink it up in real red or maybe poppy, then it's going to kind of have that candy cane feel, if you will. So I've pulled that aside just in case, and of course I'll add some embellishments once we get to that part. So I'm going to clear some things off, get some things cut, and I'll come back and finish my layout. I have got my pieces cut, but I wanted to walk you through a tip for large photos. So of course we've got the 8x10 here, and that is going to, on a 12-inch layout, that 10-inch side is going to take up a lot of space. So I still want to keep the 8x10 footprint, but because I want to add mats, I'm going to trim down my photo. So what I did was I have this mat, and this is a true 8x10. You can see here, 10. And then I have a white mat because I always like to mat my photos with white. Just makes them pop. Not only, even if you're not using a second color, it just makes the photos pop. So I've got this one that is 1/4 of an inch shorter. So you're looking at 9 3/4 by 7 3/4. And then, so now I want to trim my photo. Now it works on a photo like this because you see I have a lot of dead space. And even though I might be cutting off some of this outdoor fireplace, and even though I might be cutting off the tree, you can still see and get the gist of where we were at and that mood. And so that works with a whole lot of large photos. So keep that in mind, not only when you're taking the photo, but when you're printing the photo, just in case once you get the print home and you're going to use it, you still have a little bit of edge to trim down. So I have decided I'm going to trim it from this side. Even though we seem centered, I think it's going to just look a little bit better if it's from the tree and not the fireplace. So I am looking at 9 5/8. Now, from the top and the bottom is a little bit different. Even though my mom's shoes are already cut off, I kind of wanted to leave a little bit of grounding space. So if I were to cut off our feet right here, and you didn't actually see the shoes sitting on the grass, sometimes that plays with your eye a little bit. Also, I don't want to cut it off totally from the top because of the same thing is I want some space up above my brother's cap. So on this one, I'm actually going to take some space from the top and the bottom. So I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch from the top, and then just 1/8 of an inch from the bottom. And then we've got our 7 5/8. So you can see my sister's still got some ground up here, and then my brother still has plenty of space up there. So for this layout, I have decided to pull out our sketchbooks. I am using volume 1, and I am loving the sketch because it has strips of paper down at the bottom. That's going to allow me to kind of showcase some pattern paper since the photo is so large. And then I'm also going to use the placement of the embellishments, but maybe just play with those a little bit and put them in different spots. So I've attached my white base to my Versamat so I can line that up. And then I'm going to start attaching my DSP pieces. Now, if you are like me and love the Versamat, I know I get so many questions on it. My friend Andrea actually just posted a DIY video for a Versamat. I'll leave that link down below. You'll need to go check it out and see if you have been wanting your own. It's very easy to make it. Now, one thing that we love about Versamats is it has that back side, which I will be using here in just a second. So these two little strips, of course, you're not going to see behind the large photo. So I've just cut squares and I'm lining those up. And I'm going to repeat this gingham pattern up at the top. And then I'm going to bring in some shimmer trim. Now, this is from my Close to My Heart stash. It is red. And I'm actually going to cut it in half. So it'll be slightly smaller than 1/4 of an inch. So I've just pulled away the backing from the top portion, attaching that to my trimmer, and then I'm going to use some washi tape to keep the bottom portion of this secure. Because this is so tiny, it was kind of hard to cut without securing it. Now, after I cut it, I am going to peel that off of my paper trimmer and then peel the backing off of one of those halves. And that is going to be the separator between that bottom tree pattern and then that blueberry bushel gingham. And then once I get that secured down, I can just trim that directly off of this roll. And then I'm going to do the same up at the top. Again, separating that tree pattern and that gingham paper. And then I love, if you have shimmer trim, I love to keep that plastic, that backing. That way it makes it really easy to pull the next one. So I'm just going to trim off that excess. Now, for the most part, the paper part is done. So now comes the fun part when I get to embellish. I have placed my photo where I think I want it, and I am just looking at these die cuts, and I'm going to pull some that I might be using. Now, my first thought was a circle behind the truck and the Christmas tree, and so I have pulled that out. And then also the wreath has some pine cones, so I'm looking through the foliage, and I want to include pine cones up at the top just to kind of bring that brown to the top as well. There are several options. I'm just going to kind of swap those in and out behind that bow and then decide which ones I want. And I end up layering these with various depths of 3D foam. Now I'm going to put this Christmas tree in the truck down, and then I'm going to start looking at my stamp sets and try to decide what I want to use. Here is where I decided to bring out the one with the pine cones to mimic the pine cones in the circle. And then I tried to use this one. Remember, I wanted to use it as a candy cane, but I'm thinking that I really like the circle instead of the elongated shape. I wanted to add a stamp to that circle sentiment piece, but it's really just not working with the tree and the truck, and I really want those. So I'm going to find something else to do on that circle here in just a little bit. Now, for my title, I am using the More Wishes stamp set. I love the large sentiments as well as the smaller scripted ones. So I've taken Christmas, it's kind of blocky and tall, and then I wanted to use the word Merry, and it is scripted. Now I'm thinking that I want to overlap Merry on Christmas, so I need to pick out my ink colors. I am going with some Stampin' Up inks, and I'm thinking the darker or the lighter color will be the Christmas, and then the darker color will be the Merry. So I'm going to just ink up this Christmas, having to remember that Stampin' Up! Ink pads are totally different, so I don't want to squish it down. I am going to use the back side of my Versamat just so I can get good coverage. And that bow is basically going to kind of be a frame for the word Christmas. So I've inked that down. I'm liking how that looks. I'm actually kind of thinking I probably should have done second generation on that one, but it's too late now. I do stamp it off just to kind of see, and I decided, nah, let me go with the first. Now, as far as the Merry goes, this ink, the lighter ink, hasn't dried back yet, so I'm really not sure it is going to show over the Christmas if I stamp it. So I'm going to go ahead and ink that up and just stamp it down on a scratch piece of cardstock so I can take a look at it. I decided not to go with this late in the game. I'm going to go ahead and attach my large photo, and then I'm going to pull out the Celebrate Together stamp set. This is one of the ones that usually is released right around the time that a scrapbooking workshop is released. And there is this tiny little memories that will suffice in the title. Now I'm going to attach that circle so I can start building this little lower embellishment cluster. Again, I have that circle, and then I want that tree added with some 3D foam tape. And then I am going to do the same with the truck. I am going to bring out the truck and only put dimensionals on the spots that hang off the tree. And then I'm going to use some liquid adhesive to go ahead and adhere the top of that the top of that truck to that tree and get that adhered down. And I am loving this little cluster. Again, I'll add to it here in just a second. So I am pretty much at a stopping point. The last thing to do is go ahead and add some little embellishments. Now, there are some stars that come with these die cuts. So I am just using my Take Your Pick tool, and I'm just putting that on a roll of mini glue dots. And then I'm going to use the paper piercer side of the Take Your Pick tool, and then just remove those stars and start adhering them down. Now, I definitely want some up near that bow and then the title. And then I also want some down by the truck and the tree where I wanted to stamp that sentiment. So I ended up having 2 stars at the top and then 1 down at the bottom. And then I decided to pull out my low profile dots. You've kind of got a rose gold color, and then you've got gold. And I'm going to use both sizes, the larger and the smaller ones, to just kind of add some sprinkling of them up at the top and then down by that star by the truck. And then I am really loving that. Now, as far as the date goes, I'm going to pull out Reindeer Memories. I use this one often if you follow me over here. You've seen it. There's this little date stamp. I love it. So I'm going to ink that up in that darker color and go ahead and stamp that down to the left of my photo. And then I'm going to take my Blueberry Bushel Stampin' Right marker and just add some doodling dots around those embellishment clusters. Now, you may have heard that the Stampin' Right markers are retiring. So if you like what you see here, go ahead and grab those before they're gone. I'm going to pull that marker back out, and I'm going to add some doodle lines just around my photo. It ends up framing it really nicely and just kind of makes that photo kind of have a top to it, if that makes sense. And then I'm going to also come back in with that marker, and then even though I only have 1 line, I'm going to add some little heartstrings on each side where I have doodled that line. Here are some close-ups of that layout. It's always helpful to see the stamping, the doodle marks, and of course the layering of the die cuts using the 3D foam tape and dimensionals. Now, this layout, even though I sped it up, only took me 35 minutes to make, and that's largely in part to our sketchbook and then the products that I used made it really easy to come together. You'll find both of those linked down below. And then don't forget that this is part of the CDT collab, so you can find the playlist where you can watch everyone's videos. Don't forget, if you liked what you saw, hit that like button, leave a comment, and then subscribe if you haven't already done so. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching. I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your week.